Good evening. I want to thank you for joining us this evening for our Deconstructing Beethoven musical offering. My name is Judy Gargaro, and I'm the president of the board of directors. Before we get started, we wish to acknowledge that the Etobicoke Philharmonic Orchestra operates on the traditional lands of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and Mississaugas of Credit River. First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples have occupied this land for centuries and have enriched it with their knowledge. This is our third online musical event coming at the start of the third acknowledged wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. We have all been fatiguing with the social distancing and isolating that has been required, and the orchestra has been no different. This is our 60th anniversary season, and we have been trying to figure out what we can do to acknowledge our vibrant and rich history. Our plans have always been to have an in-person live concert, which might also be live streamed, and we will continue to plan for this so that we are ready to go once it is safe to do so. This is the first phase of our plans. We are offering up tonight's event as a teaser for the full performance of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. As musicians, we have deconstructed our playing so that Matthew and Mark can build it up again. I hope you enjoy tonight, and I extend my sincere thanks to all those who have contributed to tonight, particularly Matthew, who has spent hours preparing, editing, and constructing all of the individual performances. Without further ado, I turn things over to Matthew Jones, our music director, and Mark Whale, our concertmaster. Over to you.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you, Judy.
Are you fatigued, Matthew?
No, not in the slightest. I'm ready to rock and roll.
Did you know that you're performing Beethoven 9 in the summer?
I am excited. This is great. And in a way, this was where we had a vision about that, and we hoped to be able to do something like that, but circumstances have not allowed us. So here we are, having peeled it back to a different way of delivery.
Exactly, a different way. And maybe we could just say a couple of things about what the concept is behind. So when we started talking about the Discovery concert that we would normally have in February, and we were trying to think out how we could do it, and we realized we can do it online. I was reminded of the film Amadeus, if you've seen that. There's a scene there at the end where Amadeus is dying, and Salieri has commissioned a requiem from him, but Mozart doesn't realize that it's a requiem that's being commissioned by Salieri. He thinks it's somebody else. And anyway, basically, Mozart lies there on his bed and dictates the requiem to Salieri. And he hears it in his head. And so he hears, first of all, the bass voices and then the tenor voices. And then he says, okay, bring in the bassoons, bring in the trombones, then the timpani. And it's just astonishing because you hear how the confortatis essentially is built up. And I play it to my students. So that was what I thought we could do.
It's a scene that we both remember in our own, fondly, and we thought, hey, we could do something similar with Beethoven 9. And
I thought that maybe
Phil.
We could have a bed, and you could be dying, and I could be dictating. Yeah. Anyway.
Sure, Mark. That'll be another live stream.
So anyway, this next, do you want to tell us a little bit? I mean, so Matthew and I are actually kind of distanced at the moment, as you can see. He's slightly going out of the picture. Yeah, that's the way you want to go.
I want to go this way.
So he can't actually see the screen, so he's now going to talk about something that he can't see. So go ahead and talk about it.
Absolutely. So how did we achieve this? Well, we asked our colleagues at the EPO to film a video of their part of the Beethoven 9 opening, fourth movement. And I collected all of these videos from folks by providing a click track, which is, of course, something that musicians hear in their ear, and a video of me conducting. And I think you can see on the screen some of the results of what came in. You can see me conducting in the center there, and gradually more and more musicians joining the fold. And you can see all those tracks, the blue bars at the bottom, those represent each musician's contribution. And of course, you can add and subtract those musicians as you want to reveal some of the inner workings of Ode to Joy, which is a really interesting thing that video editing provides us in this manner. So that is what we have done.
Wonderful. So why don't we start off by listening to Ode to Joy and your accomplishment. Wow. We needed to keep going.
I have to say, when you consider what the genesis of that sound that you're hearing was, which is a whole pile of people's phones on their stands, and so that's the audio that we had, and that is the video that we had. It's remarkable when you listen to it back. When I first heard that emerge from all these files, I think I had a tear in my eye. Right. So it makes me realize that Beethoven is still there, even through the bits and bytes of the technology. There's still something poignant and really special.
Isn't that a great tune, though? I mean,
it's a great tune.
It's so simple. Everybody knows that tune. like every single kid, every method book for violin, viola, brass instruments, whatever, everybody plays Ode to Joy. My grandson has Ode to Joy on his, genius toy thing, and he's only he conducts along to it.
Absolutely, and I think that that Beethoven must have chosen or had this tune in mind from the very beginning of this symphony, because I think it's another case where you start at the end and you work backwards, kind of like when we discussed Beethoven's Symphony 3 in the same way. So there's absolutely, this theme was important. It was important to be recognizable to people, to be singable, to be shared.
Right, and what's remarkable is I was thinking, what's the Ode to Joy about? And then I suddenly realised, joy, right? It's an ode to joy. And I'm sure you've all realised that, but it suddenly hit me. I say it over and again, Ode to Joy, Ode to Joy. But it's a poem that on joy, and then when you read it, it's, O joy, beauteous spark of God, daughter of Elysium, drunk with thy fire, divine being, we enter thy sanctuary. And then here comes the great bit. Your magic binds together again what custom has strictly parted, and all men become brothers, of course, all people become brothers, sisters. But this idea that custom is, and it really speaks, I think, to kind of Beethoven's sort of political ethos, right?
Absolutely does. Yes, I mean a really interesting time, and you're right that you asked the question, what is the ode about? And it simply is joy. There's been a lot written about what this is about, of course, and it's very easy to get lost in the weeds, but I think it's that key part of joy, and whatever joy is for everybody, right? That brings us together. But
this is not actually how this movement, so we're in the, let's be clear, everybody knows that, but this is just the last movement of a 4-movement symphony, right? So we've had, at this point, if you're a first listener, you've had 3 other movements. You're in like at least 45 minutes worth of music. And now you get this final movement that involves this choir. But this is not how it begins, does it? It begins like this. So what do you make of that first?
Yeah, I think you're right. The context is really important to understand, and we don't have the first 3 movements to talk about, but they are, of course, encased in this opening as well. But right out of the gate, 4th movement, I hear frustration. Yeah. I hear even an anger, right? And then there's a lot.
Even anger. It's like it is desperation, cry,
absolutely,
anguish.
Absolutely. And how does Beethoven do this? There's so much to unpack here, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
I've got the quote that came to my mind is Walt Whitman's song myself. So I sound my barbaric yawp over the roofs of the world. Let's just listen to that again a bit more carefully and see what's going on. So, what instruments have we got in there?
Well, we're definitely hearing the winds. We're hearing some brass. We're hearing percussion, the instruments of war, right? Okay. And they're in conflict. Okay. Absolutely in conflict.
So let's just let's listen to the woodwind. So it doesn't sound as bad, right?
Nope, they're startled for sure, and you and I happen to know that they are quite happy to be in the key that they're playing in, which was given to them from the previous movement.
Right.
So in the evolution of tonality, they think they're where they're supposed to be.
Right. They're playing this first note is the key note of the last note, so it's a B flat. So you don't need to worry too much about things. So it's this. So if we just play that.
That is technology working for us, slowing down the first 3 beats of that movement.
That was that B flat, and you hear. See, and if you play a note, so you have in music you have consonance and dissonance, and consonance is when 2 notes sound well together. So if I play a,
lovely,
that's consonance. But what Beethoven gives you is this.
Ooh, spicy.
And he gives you it with the trumpet. Is that long enough for you? Do you want to hear it again? So that is these 2 notes that are so. It's interesting, isn't it? They're really close, and you'd think that something that's really close should kind of work really well because if you're really close, but in fact it needs to be in a relationship.
Beethoven is not inviting comfort with that relationship of the second.
So you've got the trumpet playing against the woodwind, which gives you this dissonance, this horrendous sound, and then he adds temps. We get finally this.
It's great writing. It's certainly sent the wind scurrying, hasn't it? Right?
Yeah.
Marvelous. And
So
like I say, the trumpet and the timpani, the instruments of war. So this is a very poignant opening to this 4th movement. After, again, a very peaceful and awe-inspiring 3rd movement.
Right. Which and that's key, right? So you have this 3rd movement that this particular critic says was too sublime for this world. It's too sublime for this world. And you can just imagine that first audience listening to this. So here's the opening of the 3rd movement. Following that, then you get this. But let's just listen again to that, because I just want to kind of like focus on some of the instruments, maybe the oboe in particular. I'm really hoping this is going to. Oh no. So did you hear the oboe? See, it just changes the texture there just beautifully, and it's so subtle because you don't really realise it until you actually listen for it. I'm going to play it once more.
It picks up our soul and doesn't let it drop off the flute note. It keeps us going.
Beautiful, Matthew.
It is a lovely moment.
That's Schiller-esque.
Indeed.
Yes.
Thank you.
And now Chris is going to be Schiller-esque.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for being here tonight. My name is Cristina Sewerin, and I'm the principal oboist of the Etobicoke Phil. I'm going to talk a little bit about the qualities of the oboe and demonstrate a couple of ways that Beethoven used it. So, this is my oboe. It's a double reed instrument like the bassoon, meaning that the reed has 2 pieces of cane that vibrate together. It has a conical bore, and at its narrowest, at the very, very top, it's only 3 millimeters or so wide. It's just very, very small. The reed on its own is not terribly loud. And so you would think that something so small would be very soft. But in fact, the oboe has an intense tone quality that can cut through the orchestral texture and project really well. It also has a very sweet sound, which has made it a really favored sort of go-to for lyrical melody writing by Beethoven and countless other composers. Melodies, something like this. oboe also really has a really nice crisp articulation that appealed to Beethoven and seems particularly well suited to his scherzo writing. The scherzo is just an Italian word for joke or something playful, and the scherzo is typically a movement in a symphony or other large-scale work. It usually sits third in the movements, and it's in a fast 3/4 time. It's something like ba 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 bum. It really came into its own in Beethoven's writing as compared to some of his predecessors like Haydn, who were likelier to use something like a more staid and slower minuet in that place. I'm going to demonstrate a couple of excerpts from a couple of Beethoven's scherzos. One is from the Ninth Symphony, and this is a bit that Beethoven references directly in the finale that we're featuring in this show. The other is from Beethoven's Eroica Symphony, and as you'll see, it's the same kind of writing, short and crisp, exactly the same tempo, so you can see how well established that form really was. It's interesting that the classical orchestra of Beethoven's time evolved to have a standard set of woodwind instruments. So it was pairs of flutes, clarinets, oboes, and bassoons. And sometimes Beethoven, for example, added a piccolo in a number of his symphonies, but something that was never added to the standard classical woodwind lineup was the English horn. So here is the English horn. You can see it's bigger than the oboe. It has a pear-shaped bell, and it has a crook, a metal crook that's curved at the top. It's odd because it's a beautiful instrument. It was used a lot in Baroque music, in the music of Bach's time before Beethoven, and it was used after Beethoven in 19th century Romantic symphonic music and beyond. But just because Beethoven never used it in his symphonies doesn't mean he didn't write for it. He wrote a couple of beautiful trios for two oboes and English horn, for example, which feature it very nicely. And I'm going to play for you finally a very short excerpt from one of those trios. It's a beautiful example of Beethoven's lyrical writing for both instruments, and it shows how well he could use the rich, reedy timbre of both the oboe and the English horn. Thanks very much.
Way.
Bravo.
You've kind of been fuzzy for some reason.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh.
I don't know. Yeah, that's better.
Okay.
That was beautiful, Chris. And it's that kind of sense of peace and serenity and sublimity that the audience would have felt at the end of that third movement, and then suddenly, as I say, they get this. this is really interesting because I don't know what's going on here, because I hear this cello bit, right? This cello bass bit. Sorry, Jessica, as a response, right? It's almost like the winds go nuts. And do you hear it as a response?
Oh, most definitely. It's a conversation here, whether it's a conversation that's going on in Beethoven's head or I mean, Beethoven is trying to communicate with us. And I hear words, right?
So why do you think you hear words? It's interesting. Let's just listen to the cello bit again.
Yeah, I mean, is it that I already have a sense of plain chant in my mind already, which the listeners would have done at the time, thinking of maybe, or Handel's Messiah, for example,
you mean
the recits.
The recitative.
The recitative, when we sing, but we say words.
And we keep going, and occasionally there is a punctuation mark. Bomb, bomb.
Right, that mimics,
Yes.
of course.
And
Yeah,
of course,
brilliant.
and that means that actually the rhythm of the music is not regular as it is in most music. It becomes irregular.
This is one of the most interesting challenges that gave me palpitations a bit in planning for this project, is that you cannot successfully do the opening of the Beethoven Fourth Movement unless you can have this recit stand for that. And meaning, if you watch the conductor is taking control of the time, right? And controlling the journey. We have to make sure that we could capture that in this.
Right. So what do you think they're saying?
I don't know. They sound kind of frustrated to me.
They do sound kind of frustrated, and of course we find out. See, it's interesting because this is, Beethoven's like preempting what's going to happen later on in the movement, and you have to remember that what happens later on has never been done in a symphony before. That there is a choral element, and as I said, this is kind of like giving the listeners, those first listeners, a hint of what's going to come. Of course, they would have seen a large choir standing there, so they.
Of course, visually they've waited 45 minutes and they haven't seen the choir sing yet.
Yes.
So there's already probably an anticipation. I also think that Beethoven's own journey, this is what becomes his final symphony. There's sketches for a 10th, but this is it. His whole journey has been about trying to communicate. Don't forget, he's also deaf at this point, right? And cannot hear.
That's really interesting.
And I think his own frustration is present here, to the point that he actually gives us the words.
He gives us the words,
Eventually.
but initially he doesn't. And so the words we find out later, and Matthew's indicated that the recit sounds frustrated. So the words that the bass singer sings are "O Freunde, nicht diese Töne." "Oh friends, not these tones." So you've just had the winds going nuts, and then the cello say, "Just don't play me this." And I believe I've got to really somehow get so I can see what's next. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to quickly go to my bass recit singer. So you can hear the exact mirroring of the bass, and of course what then happens is the wind come full back at them and just throw it back to the cellos. And then I'm hearing, I don't know about you, Matthew, I'm hearing then that the cellos say, what the bass then says, sondern lasst uns angenehmere Anstimmen und Freudenvoller, but let us strike up pleasanter and more joyful sounds.
Yes.
Okay, so this whole bit now at the beginning comes this search, right?
It does. And it's, I think, fair to point out that these are actually Beethoven's words at this point. They're not Schiller's yet.
Right.
So this is Beethoven speaking to his people. And yeah, it's a heated debate, isn't it?
Right.
I mean, the winds are reluctant, it would seem, or do not have the solution and are frustrated perhaps themselves. But
yeah,
this is the evolution of the conversation.
And so now what sounds do the orchestra offer up? So what was that, Matthew?
Oh, it's marvelous. So for those of you that know the symphony will recognize that from the opening of the first movement.
Yeah,
so we're trying the themes that have already been researched, which, by the way, all kind of relate to the Ode to Joy theme that we all know and love. So, the orchestra is trying this one out. Well, what about this one,
Right. And it's just astonishing, isn't it? So Beethoven is quoting himself, right?
Yes.
And suddenly you begin to see he has an agenda here. And so what is this quote, and what does he think of the first movement? So, Toby, the music critic, describes it as tragic. And it certainly ends almost like with a march to the scaffold. And I'm not sure how you hear this kind of opening, but what do we have in the opening? That's what we have.
Yeah,
we
kind
have
of
this bare sound, right?
Yeah, very stark, very cool, right?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because high sounds. So when film composers want to introduce suspense, they use high sounds. But also when they want to introduce a sense of something ethereal or enlightenment, they introduce.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of ambiguous here. But who is the person who is giving us the high sounds?
Oh, this is all from the winds. Absolutely, you're hearing the flute way up there in the high octaves, oboes, and it's very tight, close harmony, and it's very expansive. Of course, we have the ability to tell you how Beethoven makes it about the etherealness, right, with the next voice.
Let's just listen to. You don't have to hear the whole sound again. So right up there at the top is Lauren.
My name is Lauren Yeomans, and I'm principal flute of the Etobicoke Philharmonic, and I'm very excited to talk about Beethoven's symphonic writing. As we know, Beethoven was a hugely transformative figure in his time, and one of the most important things he changed was his use of wind orchestration. Before Beethoven, typically the wind section of an orchestra consisted of 2 oboes, 2 horns, 2 bassoons, once they were invented, 2 clarinets, and hopefully a flute or 2. Occasionally, there would be a special instrument added like a trumpet, but for the most part, wind instruments were limited and their parts were mostly just doubling the string section. Beethoven changed this dramatically. Beethoven was a champion of the wind section, solidifying their role as individual soloists with their own unique timbral contribution. In many ways, this created the pathway for the symphony to expand to greater depths, allowing for broader colors and combinations to move and astound audiences for years to come. As a flute player, it's basically impossible not to love Beethoven for the breadth of beauty he brought to orchestral flute writing. He wrote for us so many elegant solos to delicately dance with the sublime in his slow movements, like in the second movement of his 4th symphony. Beethoven also gave us ample opportunity to display our power, leading the charge of the orchestra. Like in his 7th Symphony, in the first movement, the transition from the slow intro to the fast main section is led by the flute. Beethoven is the composer who brought the piccolo to the orchestra. Yay! That's right. In his iconic 5th Symphony, Beethoven wanted to create a truly grandiose finale, to which he added this beautiful, tiny, loud monster, as well as trombones and contrabassoon for the first time. It was so grand indeed that the only other time he used these instruments again were in his 9th Symphony. Here, the piccolo not only gets to amplify the final chorus, but also has the unique chance to play a soft solo role, playing a quaint march variation of the Ode to Joy that turns into a duet with the tenor soloist singing Fra, Fra, wie seine Sonnen fliegen. This section is meant to replicate the Ottoman Janissary military bands of the time, which is accompanied by the winds, including the contrabassoon, as well as Turkish percussion instruments like the triangle and the cymbals, which are now commonplace in the orchestra today.
Wow.
Excellent.
So when we do our performance, do you think there's time for Lauren to kind of switch between
singing and
pick
playing
flute and bass,
think
baritone,
so.
soloist?
My hat goes off because I was trying to learn the baritone part to demonstrate for our fine audience tonight, but I gave up.
Can you move around, Matthew? Because for some reason that camera does. That's better. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Lauren. And this little bit you don't have that we've just got to our first movement quote. You don't have such a lot to do. So we have this empty. Somebody's called it a heavenly chord, and maybe it is. I hear it as kind of like somewhat bare, and then so we got this stillness, and then he adds this movement, right?
Right. I think that just intensifies the mystery.
No, I think it does. But what I was realizing is how little you need. Because, I mean, how long could you listen to that, actually, without thinking it was a little bit on the boring side? How little do you need to add to actually make it interesting? That's all you need.
Little sparkles of light
in
the dark.
These descending fifths. Da-da, ba-da. So there we have a response to the first
We do.
movement's theme. And what do you think? Do you
Well, I think
the
it's
cello-
one of the more interesting ones. The lower strings are they giving up? Are they're
They almost kind of fade out, don't they? Get slower
they're
and slower.
they're sort of, I don't think we're going to find anything to make this movement work, you know.
Right, and then we get this other little snippet of music, which is what?
Well, the orchestra tries a quote from the second movement.
Okay.
And well, I don't know what the cellos and bass think about it. I haven't heard it yet.
And this is very light and humorful, right? So we've had the first movement, which is kind of this tragedy, which you would hear if you listen to the whole thing. And then we have this very light. It's a scherzo. It's a joke. It's fun. It's childlike. It's quick. And you know. So what does who does he give? What instrument does he give this music to?
Short and playful winds.
Short and playful.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Very, very. And he adds. So how does he then enhance that, Matthew?
Well, there's a more percussive string addition, isn't there?
Right.
So now we're not bowing, we're actually pizzicato, which of course makes the sound of the strings sort of light and frolicky, doesn't
Right. Isn't that cool?
it? Yeah.
That's really cool. Let's hear that again.
I just can't get over how acoustically wonderful everybody's living rooms are.
I
It's
know.
amazing.
It's astonishing.
Gosh,
it's like we're all in
it's
the
incredible.
the
Incredible.
Kerner Hall or something. And okay, what happens when we put all that together? So what do they
Boy,
think
almost
of
drawing a tear there, the lower strings in their response to that. So they're not happy with that that
that? They
movement.
really weren't happy. I
Too-
mean, it was very stern, wasn't
It
it?
was too
Young
frivolous.
Barn.
Yeah, yes,
Look here.
yes. Too
Look.
frivolous.
Yeah, yeah. and so we've had the first movement, and we got the second movement.
Fail.
Okay, and now. So what's happening there?
Try the third movement.
Okay.
And well, it's interesting. Sorry, going back to the previous cello bass out of the second movement, they draw that tear. It's so sad.
Yeah.
They're clearly not happy with that. We get this beautiful quote from the third movement, which is heavenly, right? And
Yeah.
still not doing it for them.
No, but they're kind of beginning to get slightly more kind of like either impatient or kind of worked out. Let's just hear that. So
Yeah,
what
they're thinking about it.
they are.
They're and the winds are picking up on it a little bit. And hey, okay, let's
Let's try
taking
this.
them on.
So my sense is we've reached some kind of consensus on something.
It would seem. It would seem. So that we get this new material, not new because it's been built from the previous movements.
So
right?
you're talking about. I kind of like sensed I could hear the Ode to Joy theme in there.
I'm sorry. Yes, I mean that's what we get as the winds try this hybrid of all the other movements to
this
bring everything together. That's right. Yeah. And it's still questioning. Do you hear that?
Right.
It's not sure of itself. This? What about this?
And then they have this the winds and the cello have the most intense kind of interactive discussion so far. And so we've just taken the winds out of the picture just to highlight that. So here's the cello and bass without the winds. And now with the winds.
Perfect cadence to boot.
Right, and we've come to this consensus. So just to recap what's happened so far. So we've had this outcry. We have then the cellos come in and say, please, not these sounds. And we have another outcry. And then they say, come on, just kind of come up with something more joyful. And so then the orchestra tries each of the three movements that we've had so far to see whether these are the sounds that we want. And they're all basically rejected in different ways. And finally, it seems that we've come together and we're going to see what that outcome is, right?
Indeed we are.
What we've chosen. So that's the theme.
We have arrived.
It's 24 bars long.
Indeed.
And it actually, how many times does he then repeat it?
Oh gosh, it's like 4 times in total, right?
Right.
So 24 sections, 4 times. It's kind of 8 bars by 8 bars though inside that. So it's quite simple, quite relatable, right? So that it's a pattern.
Right. But somehow he manages to keep interest.
Indeed.
Right. And even the 24 bars only have 8 bars of original music, right? So it's basically those 8 bars repeated. So the other thing that I think is so interesting is, and this becomes a problem if you're a teacher and you're trying to teach it to one of, I mentioned it was in method books, and it's a pretty simple tune because it's pretty straightforward, but it has this one little catch in it, which is an anticipation. So he writes. So that is an anticipation. So another composer would have written on the first beat. You hear it? But
Right.
Beethoven doesn't. To me, it's the little fly in the ointment that just
Makes it memorable.
turns the whole thing
That's
upside
right.
down.
Makes it
turns
special.
it from something that's banal and to something that's
You know, so
divine.
often the simplest things that we write are the hardest to come up with, right?
Right.
And it is known that Beethoven labored quite hard on all of his material,
Right.
but this very simple theme too, because
Yeah.
it needed to stand up to the scrutiny that and the interest, right?
Exactly.
Of
So
his
can you
listeners.
kind of keep this attention? So now the violas come in. The violas, it's their big moment. So, viola's beautiful,
Absolutely.
but there's something that almost takes your attention away from the viola.
Is there?
Right? I don't know. What is it?
Well, the astute listener would also hear another sound that's been introduced, a counter melody to this beautiful theme in the bassoon.
Okay. In fact, there's two counter melodies.
Indeed there is.
Even more astute
Astute listener, that's
would
right.
hear the extra counter melody that Jessica is playing
Right
down there
down
in
at the
the bass,
bottom.
right?
Indeed.
Isn't that wonderful? It's like they're riffing off each other.
That's
It's like
awesome.
they're actually in the same
Isn't
room.
it fabulous? It's so true.
Yeah.
And I have to compliment Dorothy Ward, our bassoonist, on having such an acoustic closet. That is amazing.
And here she is.
Hi, I'm Dorothy Ward, and this is a bassoon. Beautiful sound, big, impressive, very imposing instrument, right? I mean, look at all these keys. So it looks very serious and imposing, but the actual fact is that the bassoon is known as the clown of the orchestra. And why is that? Well, early bassoons in the 17th century actually didn't look like this. They were pretty bad. The wood warped. They didn't have this many keys. You had to try and get all the notes from thicker reeds than this, you know, lipping them up and down and that. And they were actually pretty tough to play. They didn't sound that great. And yet they were supposed to be playing in unison with the cello and the bass in what was called a common continuo line. And so they naturally attracted a modicum of scorn. And it's thought, from what I've read, that Haydn may have fueled, if not created, the bassoon as clown idea. He liked to play musical jokes in general. He had a string quartet that actually is called The Joke. and like to use the bassoon in particular to make some jokes. In his Symphony number 93, for example, he has a section where things are getting quieter and quieter, instruments are dropping out, it's going quiet, there's little sections of silence, and it's very, very delicate. And then he has the bassoon come in and play like a low C, really vulgar fortissimo. The conductor in the clip you're going to see, George Sell, was quoted as saying that if none of the audience laughs, the episode must have been underplayed. So, as if the clown of the orchestra wasn't bad enough, thanks a lot, Haydn. In less genteel circles, the bassoon is still known as the farting bedpost. So, getting to the Ode to Joy, Beethoven in that piece has a very obvious monochromatic cello and bass line going on, and he wants to develop it with a counter melody. And he does that not just by adding, the expected next higher string layer, the viola, which would be sort of predictable, but introducing the bassoon. And so he actually, subtly highlights the introduction of that counter melody with the different timbre of a wind instrument instead of the expected string instrument, and it's just genius. So a lovely duet between the bassoons and the cello line. It's ironic that the most achingly beautiful bassoon lines in the whole orchestral repertoire are actually the exact opposite of clownish or funny. They're plaintive or melancholy, like the Berceuse from Stravinsky's Firebird that I opened with. For this project, Matthew did a video of himself conducting each session, plus he and Mark and our oboist recorded their parts, so we could play along with more than just a metronome click track in our ear. So when I was recording this, I had Maestro Matthew on my laptop that I was watching, and I had cellist Matthew in my ear while I was playing. And it occurred to me as an ode to joy that was a very unexpected, joyful experience that could have only happened in a pandemic. So for all of you, I know everyone has had, if you think about it, some moment of unexpected joy throughout this pandemic. And as bad as it's been, let's see if we can try to focus on those as we're in the home stretch here, and hopefully we can get together soon and come together joyfully to see each other again, and we can play live for you. In the meantime, let's focus on those little unexpected moments of joy that could have only happened in the pandemic. Thanks very much.
What could be more joyful than two Matthews?
I think Dorothy was
three Matthews.
Was very generous there. Thank you, Dorothy.
Yeah, lovely, that. Dorothy. Thank you.
Bravo.
Okay,
Bravo.
so moving on. So we've had our bass and cello, and then we have our violas, and then we have the first violins. And I think Dorothy made just a wonderful point there about the fact that Beethoven could have brought in the violins over the top, but he didn't. He brought in the bassoon. And so now listen to the change in register here. It's sublime. I think Beethoven composed this with the flash mob in mind, don't you think?
Maybe.
It's just the fact that everybody, we just
builds
get more and more people on.
Absolutely, but the beauty, as you're saying, just keeps evolving and coming at us, and it opens us.
It's something new. It's like a new flavor.
Absolutely,
time.
And it's inspiring each edition.
And what do we get now then?
Oh, well, bring it on. It's a very militaristic, rhythmic entity now, right? The energy is bubbling over.
Right. I think this next video is just the wind.
Oh, is
we
that
don't,
right?
We
Okay.
don't quite get to the rhythmic
Okay.
bit, but you'll see it. And now,
I gotta say though, does that not just sound like a church organ in a cathedral? Right.
yeah.
I mean, heavenly, right?
right, and
Oh,
now
yeah.
and now he transforms it. And you have to remember back to the bass, that quiet bass entry. But he transforms it with this. So you're still not going to hear the whole thing. So. So what's happening there?
I like your description of this. Off to the stars. Off
yeah?
to the stars.
It's like it
moment,
just spills out. It
Yeah.
exceeds itself. And one of the ways he gets it to exceed itself is literally he gives these what do you call them, semiquavers? I call them
16th
notes.
passages to the seconds
to
and
the
violas.
seconds and the violas.
Yeah, they're working hard.
Horrendous. They're- Right. Okay, so for anybody who's somewhat fearful that this is going to go on, because literally we've only done the first 260 bars, and we've
Indeed,
got like
yes.
another 900 to go. That's where we stop.
It
so,
is.
Matthew, do you want to kind of just recap what's happened so far in a couple of sentences?
In a couple of sentences, we have witnessed maybe it's Beethoven's internal struggle to communicate to us the kind of effort that has gone into his need to communicate with us, and his absolute desire to bring us all together through that art form and what he has to say.
Yeah, and I think that's what's just so wonderful about you get finally to the ode, and finally it's a tune everybody can sing. Who can sing? Da 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 da, or bum ba dum ba 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 ba, or
Right.
dee da. They're all intervals, and finally you get this da da dee da da, and we can all sing it, but we all sing it in our different ways, right?
I think the criticism that Beethoven received early on for this, that this theme was too simplistic and not. I think those people were missing the point, and that Beethoven was reaching out to all of us, the common man as well, to bring us together with this glorious music that we could all relate to.
Yeah.
And you're right. I think it means different things to different people, but I also think that's its power.
Okay, so this is where you get to do your homework now. Get a piece of paper. We're going to play you the whole thing, and you're going to jot down exactly what's happening as it's happening.
It goes on, and I guess it's my hope, because it was not really possible to find a place to stop this that was appropriate. Beethoven has more to say, and he does say it, and it's my hope that it inspires us to go and explore the beginning of the symphony that got us to this place, and of course the glorious ending with the choir.
That's to look forward to.
Absolutely, that's
Yeah.
right.
Not in a mosaic. Well, thank you very much, Matthew. You
Thank
did
you
an
very
amazing
much,
job.
sir.
There's some lovely comments about you in the chat.
Thank goodness.
And it just remains for us to encourage you to give generously if you have not yet given. And there is a link beneath the YouTube, I believe. And otherwise, go to our website. And we are hoping to see you in the Zoom meeting. And I think there is an email that has gone out with that Zoom address. And it should appear on the Eventbrite online site if you manage to get onto that. So see you soon.
Final recording from 164.3.
Take 109. Just joking. But I'm getting really good at the clap.
I think that was the best one yet.
My last take got ruined by a car with a very loud boombox, very loud bass, which in principle I approve of, but in reality it's not so great.